We formally welcome you to this webinar on studying strategy for UGC NET paper from law perspective, both paper 1 and paper 2. So we will be discussing paper 1 and paper 2, and paper 2 specifically from legal law subject point of view. And in the law subject, we have multiple subjects. So again, please be mindful that we have only 1.5 hours for this webinar. And this exam in itself is so huge. The number of questions in this exam are so huge. And the syllabus, the contents is so vast. So we will be able to cover only a limited portion of that. But our try would be in this next 90 minutes, our try would be that we are able to give you maximum advice that we can give. So that is why we have three faces in front of you. So now I am introducing them one by one. So I have Divya Nanda with me. She's the practicing advocate at Punjab and Haryana High Court as well as Delhi High Court. And she's a master's in law from Punjab University. She has cleared UGC NET and she has done her bachelor's in law from RGNUL Punjab. And then we have Miss Mariam Khan. Mariam Khan is Master's in Law from Jamia Millia Islamia and Bachelor's in Law from Aligarh Muslim University. She is also a UGC NET qualified scholar. She has also been the faculty of this UGC NET course. Then we have Miss Pooja Chandran, who is a great environmental law researcher. And she has been working with the Foundation for Ecological Security recently. And earlier, she was working with the Octopus Law School as a learning manager. And she is also one of the core faculties of this UGC NET course for both paper 1 and paper 2. And Pooja has done her LLM from Terry University. And she has done her BLLB from Army Institute of Law, Mohali. And now each speaker, like I will be telling you the structure of this webinar for next 90 minutes. So each speaker will be sharing their experiences on the topics that we had mentioned in the post for this webinar. So they will be sharing their experiences for next 15 minutes each. For 15 minutes each speaker will be speaking on them. And then after that, we will be having a 20-minute Q&A session. And then we will also be sharing information about the courses that we have on UGC NET exam preparation. So we have a 1-month crash course, which is starting in September. For the month of September. So we will be also talking about that course in last 10-15 minutes. So, and again, since all of you have joined, you have made an effort to register for this webinar. I request that you stay till the end and please keep putting your questions in the Q&A box and we will try to take all of them. So first speaker who is going to share her experiences with you is Divya Nanda, and over to you, Divya.
Okay. So as sir introduced me, my name is Divya Nanda. I am a practicing advocate and I have cleared my UGC NET examination last year, 2020, while I was completing my master's. This year's UGC NET examination will be held on 6th of October, which means you have roughly 40 days to prepare for examination. And this is the time for which I also studied, around 35 to 40 days. And I think that if you have a planned structure of your study, then you can easily clear this examination in 40 days, and it is very much attainable. So the pattern of the examination is that there are 2 exams, paper 1, paper 2, that will be held in a duration of 3 hours. And you have 50 questions in paper 1, and you have 100 questions of law in paper 2. Now, this year you have to consider this, that there are 2 phases of the exams that are being merged together. One from December 2020 and the next, which was to be held in June 2021. So which means that the number of applicants and hence the competition will be higher. And there can be a higher cutoff this year. So you have to prepare accordingly. Your target should be that you attain 70% marks. That is, if the total score is 300, if you want to clear the JRF cutoff, it should be around 210. And if if you want to clear the assistant professor qualification, then somewhere around 65 to 70% you should score. Okay. So now I will give you the strategy what you should do before the exam. So first of all, we'll come on to paper 1. which tests your general aptitude. Now, in this examination, you have 10 units. I would suggest that since the number of days are not many, you should not try to obtain mastery on each unit. Rather, you should try to cover as much syllabus as you can. So, I would say that you do 7 to 8 units very nicely, and you properly study all the theory, and you try to do as many questions as you can. I would suggest you do around 150 to 200 questions at least for each unit, so that when any question comes in exams, you do not get bewildered. Then for the next 2 units, this is very subjective because I am not good at mathematical reasoning. So for me, this portion was not easy, and I did not therefore make much of effort to master this particular portion. I rather focused on those portions that I could score in. So there are certain units that you will find easier. That will be your teaching aptitude, your research methodology, comprehension, communication. So these are the units that you can easily cover. You can do the questions. And for teaching aptitude, I would give a tip that I observed when I was giving the exam, that whenever there's any question that you think that you have not read, then you imagine that you are a teacher and then you answer that question. So that way you will be able to eliminate the wrong options, and you will be able to answer the right one. Okay, so then there are certain portions that have a moderate difficulty level. That involves people development and environment portion, because that is lengthy. That has a lot of conventions, a lot of dates and years that you will have to remember. So for that, I would suggest whenever you are studying this portion, from whichever source you are studying this portion, you need to make small, short notes that you can revise before the exam. For example, if there is any Stockholm Convention, if there is Basel Convention, you write that, you write the year, you write the place where it took place, and you write 2 or 3 bullet points related to that convention. So if you revise it one day before the exam, it will be very easier for you to correctly answer that question if the same question comes in exam. And you will also feel very calm, because these are the portions that you tend to forget by the end when the examination comes. So if you properly make small bullet points of each of these, it will be very easier for you to revise and to answer properly in when the exam comes. Okay, and then there is higher education system, and there is information and communication technology. Now, these are certain portions that I would say do as many questions as you can. Whatever questions you mark wrong, you need to write those questions. So you you take one A4 size sheet and you fold it like this, and on each side you write small, your whatever question has gone wrong, you write the correct answer to that. And then by the end of your preparation, when you give the examination, you will have 20-25 such sheets that you can easily remember before you can easily revise before the exam or the morning when the exam is. So I personally had done this with paper 1. I have also done this with paper 2, so that the examiner can revise. These are crisp, and you will not feel you'll feel much calmer when you revise all these, and you will remember also in the examination. Okay, so these are mathematical reasoning, certain parts of logical reasoning, and data interpretation. So I would say if you are good at this very well, I think you will easily clear the exam. But I was not good at it, so I tried to cover only those portions under these units that I was comfortable with. Rest, honestly, I did not do it, because I knew that if I properly do 7 or 8 units properly, I can easily get 35. I can easily get 35 to 40 questions right out of the 50 in the lot. Again, then I would like to talk about the timing strategy. So for every day, you must try to devote around 4 to 5 hours for paper 1. So I used to do what I used to do was every morning I used to wake up, and I used to do from I start studying from 8 until lunch. I used to do my paper 1. So every day for 4 to 5 hours, you have to give to paper one, because this is something new and this is something which is theoretical. And since law is something that you've done in your master's and in your graduation, you will not have problem revising law. But this portion, I think, is a little tricky, and it is scoring also. So you have to keep that in mind. Now, so for first 10 days, I would say that you do it for 4 to 5 hours. Then gradually, when you have gotten a hold of the subject, you can later reduce it to 3 hours every day. But you have to do it every day. Paper one has to be revised, or the questions have to be tried at least till the end of the examination. So your target should be that for each unit, you must do 200 questions. All those questions that you have answered wrong, you should make a list of all those questions, or you should mark all those questions, and then you should note all the wrong answers, and you should revise it on the last day. For paper two, which is law, I would say that there are three. I have divided it into two portions. One is the easier part, and one which is a little tricky. So if we talk about law of crimes, so law of crimes is comparatively easier. So you have to do the Bare Act properly, and the questions that come in the examination are mostly Bare Act based. At the most, there will be landmark judgments. So if you're doing the Bare Acts, under the comment section, there are landmark judgments. Or if you, while doing law or during your masters, if you have made any notes upon case laws, you use those notes. If you have not made any notes, there is a book by Singhals on case law based questions, which is for judiciary and other examinations. You can get that book, and I had done that book before the exam, because it specifically deals with case law based questions of each and every subject. So from constitution, criminal portion, commercial portion, all the case law based subjects will be covered. So for law of crimes, I would suggest you do the Bare Act properly, especially the counterfeiting, etc., the stamp portion, the offenses against human body. All these portions have to be done. You have to properly memorize everything, because they give you confusing options. So you have to, and also you have to see the difference between may and shall in all the Bare Acts. And I think you all are law students, that you must be pretty aware of it, that they try to confuse you with the question of may or shall. So you in your Bare Acts, you have to mark that wherever may and shall is used, and you have to memorize it. So law of torts, I would say it is very easy. You must have done in the first year of your law. If not, you can use any textbook. You can refer to the Law Octopus course. The notes will be given there, so you can use that. You can do as many questions. You can use the book Universal Publication has a book on that. You can use your target should be to answer as many questions, because theoretical part can be done very easily, but the fact is you have to sit in the exam and you have to answer objective questions. So your aim should be that 200 to 300 questions in law you should answer. You should attempt, you should try, and wherever you go wrong, please note it down, because as we tend to forget whatever we have done wrong, and when we are preparing for any examination, we don't go back to what we have done wrong and we repeat the same mistake again in the exam. So I would make this sincere request to all of you who are studying to please note down whatever questions you are doing wrong, make pointers, so that you, once you write it, you will not forget it and you will not repeat the same mistake in the exam. Again, then we have Consumer Protection Act. Kindly do all the recent amendments under Consumer Protection Act. Then MV Act, Competition Act, all these only have a few chapters and at least one question comes from this. So you please, I know it is difficult to read these acts, but you have to do it because these are scoring as well. Then commercial law, I would say just go by the Bare Acts. When it comes to company law, I was from criminal law background, so my company law was not good at all. So I Googled everything and I watched videos because I had no time to go and read the Company Laws Act. I just did the amendments properly. and I watch the videos to get an overview of what the Companies Act is. Then for family law also, I would suggest do the Bare Acts and questions. For Muslim law, I would say that certain questions come which ask about the property that would go for Shias, or what is the what will be the dower, or what will be the what will be bequeathed in a will, how much will be bequeathed in Shias and Sunnis. So whenever you're doing Muslim law, please make a table as to Shias and Sunnis and Hanifis and everything. What are the different sources of Muslim law? Because these are Muslim law is something that you have to basically memorize. So you just make small bullet points of that, because these are very easy questions. If you know it, you know it, and you can easily get 2 marks. So why lose it? Okay. So then I would come to the portions that I found the difficulty level to be moderate. These are first is jurisprudence, because it is very lengthy. You don't know from where the questions will be asked. So what I did was I did this from I had a copy of my Universal for LLM examination. So I did the jurisprudence portions from there. Also, you can take guidance from Law Octopus questions and Law Octopus notes that will be given to you if you join the course. Then for constitutional law, I would suggest it is very vast. You can't take up any book for constitutional law because 40 days are left. And what you can do is go by the Bare Act, do your fundamental rights, DPSPs, article wise properly, and also focus on the portions where a Supreme Court judge is appointed, how a district court judge is appointed, how a high court judge is appointed, their impeachment process, any constitutional posts that are there, read them properly, their appointment, what is the panel which appoints them, how is their salary paid, either it from the Consolidated Fund of India or it is from the state. You have to see that. So these are small things that you can easily cover from the Bare Act. So for constitution, I will suggest you properly do the Bare Act syllabus wise. You go through the syllabus point by point, then you do the constitutional law part, you do the Bare Act. And then for case laws, I would say if you have a good Bare Act, it will have comments, and in the comments you have the landmark judgments. If you don't have that, if you have any notes, if you have the Law Octopus notes, you go for that. If you don't have that, then I have suggested Singh's book for constitutional law. Singh's book for case law based questions. You go and answer all the constitutional law questions. There are around 900 questions that deal with the case laws. And for constitutional law, I would also suggest that whenever you are studying constitutional law from any book, or if you are doing the case laws from anywhere, make a list, because sometimes they ask the questions like, when was Keshav Nanda Bharti judgment was given, or when was Indira Gandhi versus Raj Narayan judgment was given, or they will give you 4 or 5 judgments and they will ask you to put them in ascending or descending order. So for that, you have to remember the year of the judgment. So for that, you have to make small bullet points. And if you make these, it will be maybe when you're studying, you will feel that this is a very time-taking process. But once you are done with it, you will feel that you have just completed, and you will not go back to your books, because it is very difficult in the last 5-10 days of the examination to go back and just read from your original source, because then you tend to get very nervous also. So you make small notes for that. Then for public international law, I had my own notes for public international law, and I had watched certain videos, especially as to you must do the definitions under international law properly, because they come and they would ask you whether this is the definition of Oppenheim or this was held in the case of Hobbes, etc. So you have to do that. You can do that by videos. You can do that by Law Octopus course, whichever way you feel comfortable. Then for environment also, it is very vast. But in paper 1 also, you have a subject related to environment. So all the conventions, as I suggested, must be properly noted down. So that portion of the environment will be completed. Apart from that, under the Environment Protection Act, there are various definitions given. For example, they'll ask you, what do you think is a pollutant under the definition of Environment Protection Act? They will give you 4 options. Now, one of them may not be in the definition as provided under the Act. So you have to deal with the definition portion properly. Then any authority under the Environment Protection Act that is appointed, under which section it is appointed, how it is appointed, penalties you may or may not do, that is upon you. I did not do it because I thought I will not be able to remember it, but it is your choice. Then things like National Green Tribunal, things like UN conferences, these are very important. You can't ignore them because these are short questions that you can answer correctly, and it can easily help you clear the JRF cutoff. Also, do all the commissions that are mentioned. Please read your syllabus properly, because in my exam it was asked, how is an NHRC head of the NHRC? Who is the head of the NHRC? Whether he's a Supreme Court judge or retired CJI. So sometimes I also got confused because I did not read about NHRC and the appointment. So all the appointments have to be done properly, the tenures have to be done, and how these people are removed. So all the heads, all the appointments, their removal, their tenure, this has to be done properly. Under what section, under what article they fall, this has to be done properly. For intellectual property rights and this law, I would say, do the theories properly. At least one question is asked from the theory portion. So do it properly. You just need to know the basics. And under the comparative public law and systems of governance, do the portion of rule of law properly. Judiciary in US and UK, you have to do. And important judgments are there under in US, which had shaped their judicial system. That had to be done. Then important judgments that has shaped our judicial system. For example, Keshavnanda Bharti. All these judgments have to be remembered. Who was the judge who gave a dissenting opinion in these cases? That also has to be remembered. Or you can just note it down. You have to just read it once and note it down, and you can revise it at the end. Then ombudsman, the concept of ombudsman in Sweden, in India, we have Lokpal, Lokyukta Act. Who is your Lokpal? Who is your Lokyukta? You have to just get an overview of it. You don't have to go inside the act and just study everything. You just have to take an overview so that if a question comes, you are not hit by a question in such a way that you are just clueless. These are certain things that I would say, these are things that you have to do before the exam. Now, during the exam also, there are certain things that you have to keep in mind. So first is, since the exam is online, please read the instructions properly. Be very calm before the exam. It is not so difficult. It is not so easy. If you have your presence of mind, you can easily do and crack this exam. Now, I would suggest, this is my strategy, that I do all my exams. I complete my exam in around 1 hour 45 minutes. I do first reading of all the questions. I mark all the questions in 1 hour 45 minutes, so that if there is any confusion, so if there are, for example, 150 questions, I try to complete them in 1 hour 45 minutes. Half of the questions I will not be sure of. So I don't get scared of those questions. I give myself ample time so that I can go through those questions again. I can make up my mind and I can mark those questions. So this is my strategy, that I complete first reading. I give at least 2 readings to all the questions. Then there are 2 options in online exam. One is you mark the question, do you mark that particular option, and it will be, if you submit that, it will be taken up for evaluation, but you can also edit it. So what I did was I marked all my answers for that, and only for those questions which I was absolutely sure about, I had marked that option, which was marked, evaluated, and could not be changed. So I would suggest you go for the safer option, and you make sure that before submitting your examination, you see that all the questions have been marked, because there is no negative marking. So you have to make sure that you don't leave any question blank. Then you have to read all the options carefully. Use the technique of elimination. Although there will be questions that will come to you that you will not be having any idea about, but don't get scared. It is very, this is how the exam is trying to test you. There will be, if you are not able to answer it, if you have completed your syllabus, you are not able to answer it, then believe it that others are also not able to answer it, and it is a difficult question. So you read it again, you read all the options again, try to put some logic into it. You will be able to eliminate two options, and then you can answer. Then you can easily be able to answer, because then the probability will be 50%. Okay. So then again, I said make a list of case laws. Whatever you are studying, make a list of case laws. So for each, for example, if you are doing Contract Act, there are certain landmark judgments in Contract Act. For example, Carlyle versus Carbolic Smoke Ball Company case. These are certain cases that may be asked in examination. So you make a either when you are studying the Bare Acts, you make a note of it, or you can, as I suggested, you can take up question banks, and in the question banks you will be asked case law based questions. You write those questions if you have answered wrong.
So in the meanwhile, as Divya is fixing her video, we would move on to the next speaker of this session. Pooja, over to you, and Divya will join in the meanwhile. Okay. So guys, now Pooja will be sharing her experiences of UGC NET examination.
Yes, thank you so much, Jatin. Firstly, for having me. Secondly, for that introduction. And a very good evening to all of you. Hope you're enjoying your weekend. Raksha Bandhan, the celebrations are over. You know when the UGC NET exam is going to be held, and now you're going to step into a more serious mode. And this is, and I'm assuming all of you are at the first stage of your preparations. You know very little about what the UGC NET is, how you should be preparing, and what you should be doing. So this is going to be quite basic. If you have any questions, of course, we're here to answer all of them. And like Divya took all of you very beautifully through each and every unit and things you should be keeping in mind, and everything that you need to study over there. But before that, I thought I'll just walk you through exactly what the UGC NET exam also is going to be, in case you're not aware of it. Primarily, you will have two papers in this, and it's one exam. You'll sit there for 3 hours, but there's paper one and then there's paper two. So paper one is more generic, paper two will be for your law. And the question of strategy is going to be relevant at this step, because these are two different papers. These are two different fields in themselves. So what you do and how you approach both of them is going to be very important. And since you only have about like 40-45 days left for the exam, even if you're starting out today, that's more than enough time to prepare for it. That also should, clear a misconception that everyone has in minds or doubts as to whether you'd be able to, study all of this and take the exam, clear it within 45 days or not. And I'm an example in front of you, Divya, to Mariam as well, as far as I'm aware of it, that we've all, I think, studied and prepared for an amount of time which was close to, let's say, 45 days or 60 days or so. This exam does not require you to go into the depths of things. You are required to simply get an overview of things, exactly what Divya told us. Problem that you're going to have is to create a strategy and keep it simple enough and ensure that it is effective. So for both of these papers, that's what you should be keeping in mind. So when we speak of paper one, it's going to be generic, but what we know is that the number of questions that are going to come up for each and every unit is going to be the same. So over time, what we've witnessed is 5 questions have been asked from each and every unit. And if there are 10 units and 5 questions are asked from each one of them, I think you can tell that, all of them are of an equal importance. Whether if you're bad at mathematical reasoning, if you're bad at, let's say, comprehension, reading comprehension, it's not going to matter much, because, it's not going to take up a whole lot of space. So strategy here for paper one is going to be, what are your strengths? What are your weaknesses? And today itself, or, in the coming few days, know what is important and what you are going to be good at. So if you already know, like, for example, in my case, ICT was something that I was really skeptical of. I didn't like the subject. I didn't want to study it. So I didn't go into the depths of it, because I knew that amount of time, if I invest in, let's say, mathematical reasoning or logical reasoning or reading comprehension or research aptitude, I will make the most out of my time if I do that. So that's the approach you should keep and have in mind when you prepare for it. For paper one, what are your strengths and what are your weaknesses? And I think a whole lot of things Divya has already walked you through. So this is my tip that I would give for paper one. For paper two specifically, what we have noticed over time is the questions are not even at all. It's not consistently distributed. For jurisprudence, constitutional law, public international law, these three, which is the first three subjects of your syllabus, they take up the maximum amount of space in your paper. So by maximum, I don't mean 80% of the questions. That's about like 30% of your exact paper is going to be from these three topics. And an average of, let's say, 10 to 15 questions can be asked from these three. So this is something that the UGC Net has employed for paper 2. Some units have more weightage, some have lesser weightage. To find out which has more weightage, to find out which is not that important, which topic is important, which topic comes up again and again, which concept is asked again and again, this is going to come from your past year paper analysis. So you should use that as, like keep it as a Bible, your syllabus and the past year papers. See what the UGC Net has done over time. And it is quite predictable. They don't get too creative, guys. And so you shouldn't do that either. You're not taking this exam to be a researcher. You're not doing it to get into the depths of constitutional law or law of crimes. You have to simply be above the cutoff marks. And over time, what we've seen is that 65 to 70% of marks, if you're able to secure it, you will be able to clear it without a doubt. Although, like Divya also mentioned, that this year particularly, we are going to have 2 batches, because December 2020 people who wanted to give that attempt, and here in this, they've again opened the registration. So yes, the number of applicants will be higher, but since the UGC Net only takes out a certain percentage of that total number, so it's not going to vary much. But since this is the first time this is happening, let's, could be here or there, or like there could be some changes. So if keeping that in mind, your aim still should be, if you're trying to focus on the UGC Net and you just want to be an assistant professor in a good university, 70% is what you should be aiming for. And if it's for JRF, then just add 5% to that. So 75%. Now, this is on the higher end of things. Usually you'll find the cutoff to be lower. This time 69% was the cutoff for JRF and 64 or 65 was for the UGC Net. So just keep a little margin for yourself and aim for that. There is no benefit of, knowing a subject inside out, know a good amount of everything. And this exam is not going to be any hassle. So 40 days is what you have in mind. So time management is something that you will have to employ. A simple strategy is going to be the most effective strategy here. For paper 2, start immediately. Pick out the important subjects. That means jurisprudence, constitutional law, and international law, and slowly build your way towards all other units. For IPR and the comparative public law, the last 2 units, I would suggest that you don't, touch too much of that because of paucity of us from that corner, which is the last 2 units of the UGC Net. And so start out from the beginning and until the end. When you're taking a paper 1, make sure that either, every day you can spend 1 hour on it, or you can keep a separate chunk of like 15 days and say that I'm only studying paper 1 within this bracket. So whether you want to do it every day or whether you want to, keep a separate corner specifically for paper 1, that's entirely your call. I kept a time frame of like 15 days or so, and I finished the entire syllabus then. And the 30 days or so that I spent was on paper 2. And that's a good amount of time. If you're focused and you're dedicated to it, you have one vision in your mind that this exam is going to be conquered. So I think this should be it. Be calm, of course, during your preparations, during the exam as well. Keep a good check over your mental health, your physical health. That's also going to be a very important thing that you should keep in mind. Have a good diet, maintain a good lifestyle, study, have a good mindset while you're studying for it. And the next 40 to 50 days, forget everything and just focus all your attention here. And since it's possible, the strategy, so I believe all of you should also try to do the same thing. And that's about it. If you have any specific questions from this, I'd be happy to answer that. Mariam, over to you.
Okay, so thank you, Pooja. Hello, everyone. Good evening. First of all, thank you so much for joining in. And obviously, it's Raksha Bandhan, it's a Sunday, but nevertheless, you all are here. Thank you so much for that. And well, moving ahead with the topic that we were discussing right now, the strategy. So before I delve into the strategy and put out what I followed personally for the examination, I think a lot of it has been covered by Pooja and Divya already. Yet still I would like to put out my strategy across here. So first of all, why do you even need to have a good strategy? So like both the speakers mentioned that you have your exam in the first week of October and it's not very far. You don't have quite a lot of time and the time is very limited. So I think considering all those constraints, to have a good and an efficient strategy, it becomes very pivotal here. Because I think if you have strategized well and if you have a good strategy, I think it is half done. The task is half done then and there itself. However, there cannot be a straight jacket formula for making a strategy in order to clear this examination. What might have worked out for me may not work out for you. Yet, you can always gather something good from the strategy what others tried to follow in the examination. So first of all, like Pooja also mentioned it and she emphasized upon it enough. I would also like to, advise all of you that before you start with the subjects, before you take up any of the subject, please make sure to go through the syllabus. Please be thorough with the syllabus, make the syllabus your holy grail. Because generally when we study these subjects in our bachelor's or in our master's, or even generally if we are revising these subjects, there are a lot. It is very extensive. The subjects are very detailed and are very extensive. However, when we are preparing for UGC NET, we need to learn to set up boundaries for ourselves. We need to understand that there is this much portion that has been mentioned in the syllabus, and we necessarily need not go beyond it. So please make sure that you are thorough with the syllabus, go through it again and again. Because for example, if I talk of law of crimes, so IPC in itself is a very lengthy subject. There are a lot many provisions and a lot of case laws and everything. However, when you simultaneously go through the syllabus, you'll see that the testing agency has restricted itself to asking very particular portions out of IPC. So had you not been thorough with the syllabus, I think it would have demanded a lot of time, which would obviously be a wastage eventually because syllabus is very restricted. Now coming on to the next very important aspect, it is going through the previous year papers and analyzing them. So previous year papers also play an important role, and mind you, both the analysis of the syllabus and analysis of the previous year papers, they have to be done before you start preparing, before you start going through the subjects actually. Why? Because the testing agency, again, like Pooja mentioned it they are not very creative and they somehow try to keep in tune with the previous year pattern, previous year fashion only. So having analyzed the previous year papers, I think it will be very easy to understand the nature of questions that are asked in the examination. And when you have this backdrop, when you know what kind of questions might appear in the exam, and then you start preparing, so you have an eye for detail then, because you have it in your brain that what kind of questions you might encounter in the examination. And simultaneously when you're reading the bare act or the book or any reference book, etc., so you'll have an eye for detail and you'll pay specific attention to those portions. Now coming on to individual strategies for paper 1 and paper 2. So for paper 1, both the speakers also mentioned that there are certain subjects that you might be very good at, and meanwhile there might also be certain subjects that you might not be equally good at. So unlike Divya, it worked in reverse for me. So I knew that I was good at this mathematical reasoning portion and logical reasoning portion. So what I did was I did not spend too much of time on those subjects. Rather, I invested that energy and that time on the remaining subjects, which I was not comparatively good at. Because, all the units in paper 1, they carry equal weightage. 5 questions from each unit are asked. And so obviously there is no unit which is more important than the other. However, it is obviously your call to devote what kind of time and what kind of energy you want to a particular subject, depending on your strength and weaknesses. So for paper one, it is very important, and I would suggest that it must be a primary task to identify your weaknesses and strengths. So having done that, you'll be able to save that amount of energy from the subjects you're good at, and you'll be able to invest it in the subjects you're comparatively not good at. So I think identifying your weaknesses and strengths might go a long way in preparation for paper one. However, there is also one specific detail that I would like to mention about paper one. So apart from all the static portion that you might be reading for subjects like research methodology and teaching aptitude and communication, ICT, etc., please always be very aware of whatever is going on in your surroundings. Be very aware of the current affairs that are happening, because for units like people development and environment, and to a certain extent for higher education also, it is not very unlikely that you will never receive a question that is current affair based. Rather, testing agency has somehow incorporated current affairs by virtue of these units into the paper. So for example, if you are reading people development and environment, please make sure to know that what are the energy targets of India, and by what year are they supposed to achieve those energy targets, or what are the recent natural disasters that India has faced. For example, we had cyclone Taute, we had Amphan, and all these things. Please make sure that you slightly cover the current affair portion also, at least what has been very much news breaking, or what formed a part of the headline recently. Please go through that also. Now for paper two. So for paper two, like we had like all of them mentioned that the uniformity of pattern as we followed in paper one, it is not the same for paper two. So there are certain units that are more important than the other unit. And again, how did we figure out? Obviously, it is upon analysis of previous year papers that we come to a conclusion of what units are important, more important, and what units are comparatively less important. So what I did for paper two was I devoted only that much time that was in proportion to the weightage that the unit carried. For example, I devoted a lot of energy to jurisprudence and constitutional law, whereas I did not devote that equal amount of energy to units like comparative public law and systems of governance, etc. So please always be conscious of the weightage that the unit carries, and always formulate your strategy in a way that you are devoting proportionate amount of time proportionate to the number of marks that it carries. Having said that, again, whenever you start reading a subject, please go through not only any basic book that you're referring to, but also if the subject, if that particular subject or that particular statute has a bare act, please go through the bare act also. And for specifically for subjects like law of crimes and commercial laws, please be very mindful of the illustrations that are mentioned in the bare acts, because more often than not, what happens is that they directly pick up an illustration from the bare act, and they straightforward give it in the examination and ask you to identify the problem or propose a solution to that problem. So if you would have studied illustrations with equal importance and full concentration, then I think it will help you in the examination also. Otherwise, applying concepts and applying conceptual knowledge is always a way out, and undoubtedly that is a way out. But if you have specifically studied the illustrations, I think you would be pretty confident, and you can say that it is a short question. I am getting this mark 100%. Also, for subjects like I said, that comparative public law does not have that much of an importance. So alternatively, instead of focusing your energy upon covering the entire syllabus, what you can do is you can chalk out the provisions and the portion in the syllabus that have been frequently asked. For example, testing agency has now, there has been a paradigm shift from asking traditional concepts like judicial review, judicial accountability, to asking questions like Right to Information Act, Ombudsman, Lokpal, Lokayukt. So please identify that change, identify that shift, and then study accordingly. Then again, one very, I'll call it underrated tip only. One very underrated tip that I would like to give all of you is, I suffered because of it. So I would like to give that tip to all of you. our exam is usually in the second shift. Like for 2019 examination also, it was in the second shift. For 2020 also, it was in the second shift. So that is the time, usually that time of the day is when our energies are at the lowest point. So a few days before the exam, please start training your brain to be very very conscious during that slot when the exam happens. Make it a habit, specifically sit down with your books and study that portion only, in that time slot only, when the exam is supposed to happen. I think it's usually in the afternoon. So train your brain to be conscious and to be functional during that bracket of time.
So guys, we have covered presentations by all the three speakers. So now we will be taking up Q&As that you have posted on the chat box and Q&A box. So guys, if you have questions on the chat box, please try to put them in the Q&A box. We will be taking the Q&A box questions first and then the chat box questions, just to ensure that we answer each and every question that we have. So first question is, will we be getting the recording? Yes, we will upload the recording on YouTube, but it will take 10-15 days. And the recordings of all the webinars that we conduct are also available in the course on UGC that we have. This webinar also and the previous webinars also that we have conducted in last 6 months on this course. This is the third webinar that we have conducted on this course. Okay, so can you repeat the law paper once again? I think Mariam had already done that. Kindly guide more on AIBE exam. So guys, we had conducted one webinar on AIBE exam as well. We had people who had cleared that exam and they shared their experiences. You can find it on YouTube, and if you don't find it, please send an email to me at jatin.garg@loctopus.com. Okay, so now there is one question. What advice would you have for NET or JRF aspirants who have just started with their LLM? Can we aim for the next cycle as well instead of the October cycle? Or should we try going for this only one in the next 45 days? So guys, I would like to answer this first. First of all, there is no maximum number of attempts for UGC NET exam. You can give this exam as many times. Even if you are of 60 years of age, you can give this exam. Even if this is your 60th attempt, you can always give this exam. There is a age limit for JRF, but for NET, there is no age limit for NET exam. But if you are in the first year of your first semester of your LLM, so why I'm saying you can give that exam, because there is very lesser contribution of LLM in UGC NET exam. Though it's a mandatory requirement that you need to have an LLM degree or a master's degree to be appearing for UGC exam, UGC NET exam, but all the type of questions which are asked in the exam, the syllabus of the exam, you will be able to attempt most of it even if you are an undergraduate student or if you have just qualified your bachelor's degree. There are some subjects which require knowledge from your LLM, which is research aptitude, teaching aptitude. So generally these comparative public law is one subject which is covered during LLM in most of the law colleges. Rest all of the subjects are covered in undergraduate program as well. So some colleges don't have specialization such as IPR, cyber laws, IT Act. So you need to go through those acts. But again, there is no harm in sitting for the exam, even if you are in the first semester. So now there is one trick here. So you should be in the final year of your LLM when you are appearing for this exam for eligibility wise. So if you are in doing 1 year LLM, even if you appear in the first semester, you will be, if you qualify, the certificate will be valid for you in that case also. But in case it is a 2-year LLM, the certificate will only be valid if you have appeared in the second year of your LLM, not in the first year of your LLM. Pooja, Divya, and Mariam, if you would like to add anything to it.
Yeah,
Yes.
sure.
Okay, please, Mariam, you continue.
Okay, so I think this is a very relevant question. I remember going through the same dilemma when I had appeared for my UGC NET exam. So I would like to tell you that I think first semester is absolutely perfect. Even if you're in the first semester, you should go for it. Why? Because if you have qualified your LLM entrance, so you must have studied a lot of subjects which are common for UGC NET examination also. So you are in that inertia of motion where you have studied those subjects and you have to just revise those subjects now in order to prepare for UGC NET examination. Also, secondly, like Pooja also mentioned in the beginning of this, and Jatin sir also mentioned in the beginning of this webinar, that most of us have qualified and prepared for this examination within a span of 45 to 60 days only. So I think that time should suffice. And why to just sit and wait for the next cycle to happen, then appear in that examination? Why not just take a chance, and if odds be in your favor and if you've prepared really well, I think it should be easy, and being in first year at least should not be a problem.
Yeah. Okay. So now there is one more question. Is there any negative marks? Guys, there is no negative marks for any question in the UGC NET exam. You should attempt all the questions that you have. You can park some questions for second thought, but you should be trying, even if you don't have any idea on any question. So you should be answering that questions in the first attempt itself. Like where you completely know, where you're sure that you don't know anything about it. You don't know anything about this case or this definition. So if you have to make a wild guess, so make a wild guess in the first attempt itself. Don't waste time. Rather invest that time in some other question. So guys, especially, so where you know a bit of things and where you are not sure, like where you need to think more, those questions you can mark for review and answer them later. But all the questions where you're too confident or least confident, that you should be marking in the first attempt itself. Okay, so there is one more question, Pooja. I would redirect that question to you. From where can we study the current affairs?
Okay, so first and foremost thing, current affairs doesn't mean this is kind of like a UPSC level of preparations or civil services exam. You have to just know what is happening around you. So for example, there was a recent leak of styrene gas in Vizag. So that was a major event that happened. And as a law student, as always be, so we should know what it was, the legal implications of that, and just keeping an eye out for, whatever is happening around you. That should suffice. So having said that, I believe at least even, if you're reading the newspaper every day, that would be a good resource. So it's not going to get too complicated in that sense. And for paper one as well, like Mariam also mentioned, it doesn't mean that research aptitude or comprehension, like none of these units will have not much scope of any kind of a question related to current affairs. It's the last 3 units that you have within paper one, which have the scope for that. So if you're dealing with people development and environment, these are the events that you should be looking out for, what's happened in the past 2 to 3 years. Just having like normal, just understanding of whatever has been, taking shape. So that should be one. Higher education specifically will be related to universities. So keeping an eye out on data which comes out from them. The UGC also, it issues all of these and revises the data that they have, and keeping an eye out, I think for that should suffice for you. For law is where case laws are going to be more important. So past 2 to 3 years, the major case laws, the landmark decisions that have come up, those are the ones that you should also be keeping in mind. Like when I was sitting for the UGC NET, lots of questions were asked from the NAS Foundation case or about decriminalizing homosexuality. So the judgment was like, and excerpt from the judgment was taken and questions were asked from that. So just the most landmark, the biggest ones, and I think all of us also know which ones there would be. And whenever you're studying each and every topic in the course, particularly, we've also tried to make sure that we're also giving a good overview of all the important events related to that subject. So it would be dealt with in a much more deeper level there. Now, if Mariam, do you have anything to add to that?
No, I think Pooja, that does the work.
Okay. So now next question for Divya. So one student is asking about who may give in for adoption under family law. So Divya, if you would like to cover that, or Maria, who may give in for adoption?
Okay,
Who may
so
give in for adoption?
Yeah, so Sushil Kumar had asked this question. So Sushil Kumar, if you
There-
can be more specific in this. Yeah. Yeah, Mariam, you were saying something.
So if you look at the legislative scheme of Hindu Adoptions and Maintenance Act of 1956, you will see that, there are particular set of conditions that have been given under, let's say section 5(6). And then they have, very well explained all those conditions in the subsequent sections. So there is the Hindu Adoptions and Maintenance Act. It specifically provides who can give in adoption, who can take in adoption, and who can be adopted particularly, and what all other other conditions, miscellaneous conditions that have to be followed for a valid adoption. So when it comes for the question that who can give in adoption, so it is only the father, the mother, and the natural guardian of a child, the guardian of a child, who can give a child in adoption. And mind you, there are certain prescribed and predefined set of circumstances only under which a guardian is entitled to give away a child in adoption. For example, if both the parents are not alive, or if they have ceased to be a Hindu, or if they have renounced the world, or if they have been declared to be of unsound mind by a court of competent jurisdiction. So only in those specific circumstances only will a guardian be able and entitled to give away a child in adoption. However, to summarize the answer, it is father, mother, as well as the guardian of the child.
Okay. So next question is around there is a change in the pattern of questions in the law subject. How to cover that? Anyone?
The question is a bit vague, so if KP you can elaborate on it, it'll be great. But I think what he's trying to say is that the kinds of questions, the subjects that were being asked earlier, that's changed. And yes, we had like labor law and these concepts were being asked earlier, but lately we've had at least the past 2-3 exams that we've had, it's taken a shift, and we have some new subjects which have been introduced. So we should not look into, if you're talking about the change of syllabus, then yes, of course, the updated one is what you should be following. But if a pattern has changed, then of course the exam is also evolving along with us and our understanding of the law. So the kinds of questions that was being asked earlier was rather more direct and provision based. Very, very, there wouldn't be too many doubts in your mind as to what the question could mean. But over time, we've had questions like assertion and reasoning based. Then we have questions like matching one set with another set. So within one question itself, the UGC net is now trying to get an understanding of how clear you are with your concepts. So these questions have become a bit, I would say, complicated, but if your concepts are strong, there is no way that you will not be able to answer it.
Yeah.
So the law there's no change in the pattern of the law itself in the exam. Syllabus, yes, has changed. And as you can see, the types of questions have changed. So it's more application-based questions that could be asked you. So these are the things that you should be keeping in mind.
And also, I would like to add on to this. Please don't keep previous year's papers as benchmark. Like, they are for reference, but they are not everything. Sometimes some students think that we will just attempt some 10-year previous year question papers and be able to clear UGC net. I don't think that is the right approach. You should know all the law subjects decently. You don't have to do mastery on any one subject. You should be knowing them decently. You should be knowing them, their provisions, sections, some important case laws. So that basically UGC net wants you to be jack of all trades, not master of any one trade. So that is also important for multidisciplinary teaching. That is one aspect which is tested time and again in UGC net. Like, are you fit for multidisciplinary teaching or not? Suppose in your university, a teacher of IPR law goes on leave for 2 months or 3 months. So will you be able to take a backup class for him or her or not? So that is the criteria basically. And also, can you suggest any specific books for law paper? And there is one more question. Kindly highlight most preferable guides or materials for both the papers. A few guides are not properly up to date. Again, I'm sharing my experience first. Most of the guides that are specifically for UGC NET, since the syllabus is so vast, we can't expect, as I mentioned just now, we can't expect one to be a master of all the subjects. So obviously there will be some mistakes in some subjects in guides. If there is one guide which is covering all the 20 subjects of law, like it is covering IPC, it is covering contract law, it is covering family law, it is covering IPR law. So you can't expect them to be 100% right about everything. But what you should be focusing on is the bare acts will be 100% right in all the cases. So first and foremost book that you should be referring to is bare acts. Then second is some trademark books on those subjects. Like for contract, I always say Avtar Singh or Bangia. Then for family law, again we say LexisNexis books of Poonam Pradhan Saxena, Paras Diwan. So there are books for all the subjects.
Yes, I think I agree with what Jatin is saying about the subjects, that if someone is claiming that, we will cover the entirety of all the 10 subjects from constitutional law to IPR to everything under the sun for us, then you should be looking in the other direction for sure. That's not a good resource, I would say. Instead, try to look for things which are providing you an overview of things, and at the same time, are giving you enough depth that the UGC NET also asks for. Bare Act should be one. Second should be any book that you were using when you were a law student, in whatever books were recommended to you during your law school, that should suffice. Yeah. For paper one, although this is for paper two specifically, but for paper one, there are books with that from Arihant. It's a good publication. Truman is a good publication for that. So they have compiled all of it too. There could be some mistakes here and there, some errors. It's not error-free, but at the same time, it's a good resource to depend on and prepare for the exam.
Okay, so Garima has one question. What is the validity of UGC NET exam certificate? So the validity is lifetime. So once you clear UGC NET exam, it is valid for lifetime. So you don't need to clear UGC NET exam again. If you are a researcher below 32 years of age, I think, then if you clear UGC NET with in the top 3-4% category, then you will also be eligible for junior research fellowship, or some people also get senior research fellowship with the time. After they take up junior research fellowship, you can also be eligible for senior research fellowship grant, which is enhanced scholarship for doing PhD.
Just to add to that.
Yeah.
So the eligibility for UGC NET is lifetime, but for JRF, and if you have qualified for it, you need to claim it within 3 years as well. So that means you need to start your PhD and make the claim 3 years after the date within which you've received your JRF certificate. So just that, and then age requirement. But for NET, you can give it, you can forget about it within one go.
Yeah. So now very important question, very good question. It's very difficult to remember section numbers. Usually asked how to master it. Pooja and Divya, both of you.
So my suggestion would be you do your bare act properly, and then you go through the index. You revise the index again and again. So when you revise the index, you will be easily be able to memorize as to what law is contained in what section. So this is or you can make small bullet notes whenever you are studying. So whenever you have studied like 50 sections of a particular act, you just try to memorize what all you, for example, what was in section 2, section 3, section 4, and then this is how you memorize it. And see, we are all law students. This has been difficult for us, but now that we have done our LLB and LLM, I think this is something we have to do. We cannot deal without memorizing the sections. So either you can make bullet points about the section, or you can go through the index and revise the index of a particular act again and again.
Yeah, so exactly. This is something we can't escape. And this is something that whenever you sit down, this is an aspect you will have to keep in mind. How do I remember all the sections? And like Divya said, the scheme of the act, the index, go through it again and again, keep revising it. Even if established a good hold of the subject, still keep revising the index, and that's the best way to go through it. Another suggestion I'd like to give you here is, if you, because again you can't remember the index of all the legislations we have. Even if you look at the commercial laws, your sixth unit of the paper 2 of UGC net, you have contract law in it, you have partnership, sale of goods, company, and negotiable instruments act. So of course it's going to be difficult to do this. So here is where you have to be mindful as to what are the aspects I should study, what are the aspects that I'm not studying, the ones that I'm skipping because of the return over the investment that you're making in this particular case. Something in depth, even then the smart thing would be to do to know the scheme of the act as to the chapters that are there. If you don't remember what section 29 of the Contract Act is, but if you remember the particular chapters and what the chapters talk about, that's going to be a very, very important tool within your hands. For example, if in public international law, you have to study the UN Charter as well, and lots of provisions come from there directly. So which chapter deals with the Security Council, which chapter deals with the ICJ, which chapter talks about the General Assembly. So if you only remember the chapters and the range of sections, like section 6 to 22. So when a question is asked from you in the exam, then that bulb should automatically light up, even if you haven't studied it in detail. So some tricks of this kind is something you should keep in handy. Even if you're not studying a subject in depth, make sure that you're getting an overview and also have an eye on the range of sections that you have.
Thank you, Pooja. Thank you. We have one more question. Is the question paper different for NET and NET JRF? No, the question paper is same. You just need to score more marks from the. So then also, can any of the speakers simplify for us the relevance of NET, irrespective of PhD being made mandatory for assistant professor eligibility? Pooja or Mariam? Mariam? Yeah.
So like with the, when we opened the webinar, it was clearly put out to you that either it be your admission to, securing a PhD seat, or it be for assistant professorship, NET is compulsory. However, the latest, according to the latest guidelines, from July 2021, PhD has been made mandatory for the appointment as an assistant professor. However, it was only until few days ago that UGC, they issued an order, or maybe it is under consideration, that citing COVID as reasons, maybe this, making this PhD mandatory for appointment as an assistant professor, this may be put on hold, citing COVID as reasons. So this might not be implemented for maybe next year or so. Having said that, even if you're not going for academia directly, even if you're not applying for the position of assistant professor, even for securing a PhD seat, many universities, they exempt all those candidates who have cleared UGC net. They exempt from those candidates from undertaking a written test. For example, Jamia, DU, and most central universities, they exempt all those candidates who are NET qualified from attempting the written test, and they directly appear for the interview. So in those cases also, if you're directly appearing for the interview, and if you're directly submitting and presenting your research proposal, you're already a step ahead from most of the people, from a majority of the crowd who might be, in competition with you for the same seat. So in those cases also, it becomes really relevant. However, for, autonomous colleges, UGC net is still a very legitimate criteria for appointment as an assistant professor. It is only for universities that this has been, PhD has been made mandatory. So I think that solves your query.
Yeah, and to add to that, I think the status as well, and to be able to say that you've qualified UGC net also adds a lot of weight to your resume, or your portfolio. So in my case particularly, because I was in a time and space where I felt that perhaps I could take this exam, I'll take up academia, I'm not pursuing it, but at the same time, it's come in handy. And, a lot of opportunities come through qualifying an exam as well, because you've already shown your mettle. Another thing is that, of course, these concerns, that the fact that if PhD is made compulsory, not a lot of people will now take up the UGC NET exam. This is something, of course, the UGC also knows of. So there are talks, and there is in consideration the fact that maybe we should put, more incentives in this game. So I think all of you know that now through CLAT as well, for PG specifically, and for CLAT, if you've qualified it, a lot of PSUs now take CLAT scores to hire people. So with the UGC NET as well, it's expected that, eventually they will also develop a system where directly people can be hired through this exam. So, there are multiple benefits, and it's an exam. It's going to add a lot of value to your portfolio. So considering it, even if you're confused as to if you should take it or not, these are subjects that you've studied all your life, not all your life, at least at least 5 years of your life or 6 years of your life. So if you've done that, and you can just clear the exam and wait until, the moment strikes, and you can capitalize on that.
Yeah. And guys, one more thing. If you have prepared for CLAT PG, 70% syllabus for the UGC NET exam is same. 60 to 70% of the syllabus is same. So if you have already appeared for CLAT PG, there is no harm in appearing for UGC NET also. Even if you don't want to get into academia, this is a good point to test your legal knowledge, like on wide range of subjects. I personally don't think that only PhD should be made compulsory to be a legal academician. I think both PhD and NET examination should be compulsory for that matter. Because the reason is PhD will not be able to test your aptitude skills, reasoning skills, your mathematical skills. Because mathematical skills are very much required. You will be required to work on Excel sheets, calculate marks, make reports for the universities. So there is a lot of work which you have to do as a assistant professor or as an associate professor, which is not related to completely only law, only your subject. And also in PhD, you do mastery over one subject. You do a thesis on one of the topics of one of the subjects. You don't get to study all of the subjects. So I think, and also all the exams of PSUs, like the banking sector exams. So most of the syllabus of those exams, competitive exams, is similar to UGC NET. So if you are prepared for UGC NET well, because what we are saying, what we have said in the last 75 minutes is that prepare for all the subjects. So if you are prepared for all the subjects, it will help you in all the stages of your career, whether you are appearing for an RBI exam, SBI exam, or any legal manager exam. Most of the subjects will be covered from here: jurisprudence, contract drafting. Contract drafting is in syllabus of every particular exam that is out there in for a legal manager or a legal advisor position with government run PSUs. So I suggest that you can give it a shot, and even if you are half prepared, please go for it. It will give you a lot more clarity about your strength areas and your weak areas. So I think we are done with all the questions. Pooja, Divya, and Mariam, they explained everything very well. They answered your questions very well. So thanks a lot, Pooja, Mariam, and Divya. So guys, if you have anything to write about the feedback of this webinar, please write on the chat box. I will be telling you now briefly about the course that we have on UGC NET examination. So please give me 5-10 minutes for that, and we will end this session by 7:30. In case you have some feedback, positive or negative, about this webinar, please message that on the chat box, and we hope we will incorporate that feedback for all future webinars that we conduct. So first of all, we have 1 month course on UGC NET exam preparation. We have 2 courses basically, one for paper 1 and one for paper 2 law. For paper 2, we only discuss law subjects, all the law subjects. So what all do we have in this 1 month exam course? We have detailed study material on each of the subjects. Even in each subject, there are multiple sub-subjects. Like in commercial law, there are 4 or 5 different subjects. So we cover all of those subjects in 1 month. We provide you with the reading material subject wise. Reading material is very short, precise, and to the point on all the topics which can be asked in UGC NET examination. We provide you with some quick reference documents on ready reference for case laws, section-based questions, as your questions were, how to approach them, what are the important case laws, what are the important doctrines in constitutional law. So we provide you with the 2-3 page shorter quick reference documents on that. We have some recorded lectures on some of the most important topics in UGC NET examination. Then we conduct 10 such live sessions. Like today we conducted very broad live session on UGC NET preparation. Then we conduct subject-wise strategy sessions, 1.5 hours each, subject strategy sessions, which are called live sessions. So over the period of 30 days, there will be 10 such sessions for paper 1 course and 10 such sessions for paper 2 course. So if you are doing both of the courses together, there will be 20 sessions in 30 days for you. Overall, if you are preparing for this exam in only 30 days, you would be required to spend around 2.5 to 3.5 hours a day. If you spend that much time over a period of a month and do these courses, you attend all the live sessions. And again, we have around 100 to 150 questions based mock test for each of the papers, for each of the subjects. So we have around 2000 question bank for paper 1 and 2000 question bank for paper 2 subject wise. And we have four full mock tests as well, which test your complete overall knowledge on UGC NET. It will actually give you the same experience as you are sitting for the UGC NET exam, because the exams that we conduct are also computer based through a software. The software is similar to what UGC NET use. It's not the same software, obviously, but we use the similar interface where you can mark any question for review. You can come back, you can attempt those questions. You can see which questions are answered, which are not unanswered. So to give you the similar experience of UGC NET examination, so we have 4 mock tests on paper 1, complete mock tests on paper 1, 4 complete mock tests on paper 2. And we also conduct live sessions to discuss these mock tests. So this is 1 month courses, and the courses are going to start from 1st of September. I'm writing down the links of these courses in the chat box. I'm also writing down a coupon code which is valid till 25th. You can avail 10% off because you attended this webinar. You spent 80 minutes with us. Just to compensate for those 80 minutes that you have spent with us. And if you are willing to register for our courses, you are eligible for 10% off. I will also be writing down the coupon code. So in case you are planning to register for a course, please go through the details very carefully. If you have any questions, reach out to us. I'm also writing down the email ID, and we will call you back and resolve all of your queries in next 3 or 4 days. So I'm writing down all of the details on the chat box. Please see them. And in case you have more questions, please put them on the Q&A box. And in case you have any feedback, please mention that on the chat box. So I'm writing down the links. Pooja, in the meanwhile, there are 2 questions on the Q&A box. You can answer them.
Sure. But just to add to something that you had mentioned, is that the fact that right now we have very little time left, and just knowing what to study and knowing how to study it is going to be one of the most important aspects of your preparation. So what would happen in the course in general is, and what our attempt is, that to be able to create accountability for all of you, that you stay track over the next 30-40 days, and you have guidance throughout as to what should be studied, what should not be studied, how it should be studied. So that's what the agenda is going to be. And of course, you will be doing most of the study, but it's more of like a guidance as to how to get through the exam and make sure you pass with flying colors. And Jatin, there are not much questions. It's a great feedback that we've received. Thank you, Gauri and Chandrasekhar. If anyone has any questions, we'd be happy to answer it.
And guys,
related to UGC NET in general.
Even if you don't join our courses, even then you can send us an email about any guidance that you require, and we will try our best to help you because at Octopus, our mission is to enable informed and inspired careers, and offering a course on UGC, offering such webinars on UGC Net is aligned to our mission. So we would try to help you even in the case you don't want to offer, join courses, but in case you would want to appear for the exam. Okay, guys. Thanks, Divya. Thanks, Pooja and Mariam. Thank you for your time and valuable suggestions for our learners. Thank you.